Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1990's Represent. We're still in our second cycle of 1991, and this episode we're talking about the classic, iconic Point Break. Absolutely love this movie. When I did the first cycle, we did Terminator 2, which I just think is one of the most iconic movies of all time, but I was really excited to get back to 1991, specifically to cover Point Break, just because it's an amazing movie. I didn't see it in theaters, but I did see it on HBO like a couple years later or something like that. I didn't know about this movie until like the fall, even though it actually like released in the like midsummer. Actually grab my notebook here. We got some notes about it, and we'll discuss it further from there. So let's go here. Here we are. So Point Break, first released July 12th, 1991. Like I said, I didn't hear about this movie until like September because the theater up here, at least at the time, they only had two screens, and they would either get movies either very late and in many cases not at all. So I don't think they got Point Break at that theater until like September or whatever it was. Because I remember going through like one of the daily local like newspapers and seeing they were playing Point Break, and I forget what else was playing at the time. But first heard about it in like September of that year, even though it came out in July. But just an iconic, classic movie. It's like got surfing, it's got skydiving, it's got bank robberies, it's got action. It has great chemistry between Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze. Also, Gary Busey is awesome in this. John C. McGinley plays like the FBI, like their boss, who's just kind of like totally like all over them for, in his mind, like screwing up. Just a great performance from John C. McGinley as well. It falls kind of into like the buddy cop era with kind of or style of movie with Keanu and Gary Busey, but then you also get this kind of complex relationship between him and Keanu with Swayze. It's very well done. So development on this film apparently started in 1986. I think they had kind of like written a base script, and the kind of production fell through. But then James Cameron and Catherine Bigelow like further developed the script. Let me see what I have here. They further developed the script. Apparently, like they just made it overall better. But the film didn't end up getting made until 4 years later. So like it didn't get made until like 1991. It was originally developed kind of like in the mid 80s, and kind of like development kind of stalled out, and then eventually they came back to it kind of like in the early 90s. Had a $24 million budget and ended up grossing, looks like 83.5 million. Let's see. Back in 1986, some people that were considered for the role of Johnny Utah. This is kind of an interesting list. I think I can see some of these people. One person on this I can't see playing Johnny Utah, but because I think Keanu Reeves is kind of perfect for the role. But other actors that were considered for the role were Johnny Depp, who I can kind of see. Matthew Broderick, can't even like really even like remotely see him playing this character. Charlie Sheen, you can kind of see it, I think, and then Val Kilmer as well, which I can kind of see playing that role. But let's see here. Yeah, they were all considered for the role of Johnny Utah. Ridley Scott was also in talks to direct it initially before the production kind of fell apart. W. Peter Iliff, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, is the only credited screenwriter, even though Catherine Bigelow and James Cameron went back and did a ton of writing on the script. Obviously directed by Catherine Bigelow, executive produced by James Cameron. James Cameron had like a really big year, obviously with Terminator 2, but also involvement with this. I think two of the year's best films as far as like, I don't know, like if you would look back at Point Break and say that it's like I think it's just an awesome movie. Like it's always a fun time. It's not like a Academy Award winning film or anything like that, but it definitely knows what kind of movie it wants to be, and it doesn't really hold back from that. It just you get kind of everything that's advertised in the film. But they did, like I said, there was like they had to do all the surf training, so they had to like Patrick Swayze, Keanu Reeves, and Lori Petty had to be trained in surfing. Keanu, I don't think had like in the research I did hadn't surfed before that, but has since kind of, or at least at the time, took it up as a hobby. Patrick Swayze, I think like cracked like four ribs during like the production, and then apparently Lori Petty had never been in the ocean prior to doing this. So like definitely like a lot of interesting training that had to go on for this film because like a whole big part of the movie is the surfing, and the surfing just looks great. The cinematography is awesome. Um, you could like just like kind of like vibe out and watch the surfing. It's really well done. It looks like really relaxing too. But so like and then there was skydiving in the movie, like the skydiving sequence. Like there's two of them, but the main skydiving sequence toward like the beginning of like maybe like the third act is just beautiful. Um, it looks awesome, and apparently they had to like develop like certain like rigs that would kind of like go around the actors so they could actually like do their lines while doing the skydiving. Patrick Swayze apparently was like did like some 55 jumps, I think, in the for the film, or maybe not like for it specifically, because he was really into skydiving and was doing a lot of skydiving on his own time. And when he signed up to do the movie for insurance purposes, they kind of made him or asked him to stop skydiving. So, but they kind of compromised and said, okay, like you could do one like real like skydive in the film, and the final skydive in the film when he's sitting on the plane, he's like adios amigo, and just kind of like falls out of the plane. That was a real skydive that Patrick Swayze was basically kind of given as because to kind of like because like well if you skydive and get hurt like you can't do that, so the insurance company like didn't want that, so the compromise was that he would be able to do that dive as like a reward for basically kind of not skydiving during production. But he was super into it, so that scene is actually when he dives off and says "Adios, amigo." That's totally real. The Fast and the Furious kind of is basically steals the plot of this essentially, where in Fast and Furious, Paul Walker infiltrates Dom's like street racing gang. In this, Keanu kind of infiltrates Patrick Swayze's bank robbing crew. And the bank robbers here, the ex presidents, just a really iconic thing. I think this is the first time I remember seeing like in the poster, seeing these like kind of caricature like president masks, which are kind of like synonymous with this film. But you have Reagan, you have Nixon, you have Johnson, and then you have Jimmy Carter as like the four like main bank robbers in the masks that they wear. Um, Really cool casting bit. Actually, two. Let me actually bring the cast up because I'm probably going to forget the one guy's name here. Let's see. The guy who plays War Child. If I can pop up here, there's Rosie. Let me see where War Child is here. So the actor's name is Vincent Klin or Kiln, and I think he's only been in like a couple things. The only thing I've seen him in are like it's two films I've seen him in that I remember. One of them obviously is Point Break. The other is Cyborg with Jean-Claude Van Damme. He plays like the main villain in that. In Point Break, he plays War Child, who's the guy who's like after like Keanu surfs around them and they beat him up. He's like, no, we're just gonna f you up. That's that actor. Also in that scene, Anthony Kiedis is in this movie from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He has like just a line of dialogue where he's like, oh, this is the part where you tell me that locals rule and yuppies like me shouldn't be surfing your break, right? And one guy's just like, no. And then Anthony Kiedis is like, that would be a waste of time. And then War Child is like, that's what he says, we're just gonna f you up. But there's some of the lines in this movie are super iconic, like back off, War Child, seriously. That's kind of like a classic line. Um, the line of I just love it because it's like Gary Busey is they're doing a stakeout and he's like Utah, get me two sandwiches. And speaking of sandwiches, I have a note about the sandwiches just because like inflation being what it is, this is crazy. So there's a scene where they're staking out a bank that the ex presidents are gonna rob, and he's like, hey, like so. Pathos, I think that's Gary Busey's character is like, hey, there's a little sandwich shop around the corner. They have really good meatball sandwiches. When you go get me one? And he's like, no, actually, get me two. So Keanu goes to get these two sandwiches. He gets two meatball sandwiches, I think it's like a turkey on wheat or a tuna on wheat, and two lemonades. And the cost of it is like $7.84. I'm like, geez, dude, that's like I wish we could go back to those prices. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's just a very funny kind of interaction. It's got a really good soundtrack too. Let me pull up the soundtrack listing here. So I'm just going to go off some of these tracks. You have Nobody Rides for Free by Rat. You have I Want You by Concrete Blonde. Volcano by Jimmy Buffett. And 6 Was 9 by Jimi Hendrix. Let's see, Rose Colored Glasses by School of Fish. Criminal by Public Image Ltd. or Limited. My City by Shark Island. Seven and 7 Is by Love. You have Smoke on the Water by Loud House. Go Long Cowboy by Westworld. Let's see, Down to the Wire by Little Caesar. Over the Edge by LA Guns. You have 7 and 7 Is, again with Liquid Jesus. You have I Will Not Fail by Wire Trade. OG Original Gangster by Ice-T. And then you have Foot Chase by Mark Isham. That's kind of like a score. And then Hundreds of Tears by Sheryl Crow. So just definitely like a really good soundtrack. And let's see, the soundtrack. And the other thing, before we get to the plot, we've actually done in the notes here, is there is a thing called Point Break Live. And I remember first hearing about this in 2010 at a restaurant where I worked at, where somebody had discussed it because like the guy was doing an impression, or somebody in the kitchen was doing an impression of Keanu Reeves when he's yelling at Swayze. He's like, "I am an FBI agent." Like, or that line is. And that's when the conversation turned to Point Break Live, which is like a stage play or stage show or like a comedy club where they have a cast of characters or actors that act out the roles aside from Johnny Utah. So Johnny Utah is played by somebody from the audience. They give that audience member cue cards to read their lines, and hilarity ensues basically. I'll throw a couple links in the description to where you can actually check out some of the stuff from Point Break Live. There's like a little one of them is an interview with Keanu Reeves talking about it in a somewhat recent interview. I think it was like right around the time of the first John Wick, because the Point Break remake hadn't come out yet, and I'm not going to even watch that or even entertain the option of that. But the remake, that is. But then the other video will be a one of the performances of Point Break Live. So just a really funny kind of thing. It would be really funny to do. But now we're going to get to the plot of this movie. So the opening scene is really cool because it actually has surfing going on in it. So it basically juxtaposes the two main roles of Bodhi and Johnny Utah. Bodhi is surfing, and Johnny Utah is doing like an FBI gun range trial where he gets 100%. Johnny Utah gets assigned to LA, where he gets assigned. He gets teamed up with Gary Busey's character Pathis, they're working these bank robberies. They meet up with John C. McGinley, who basically immediately chews him out right away. He's like, "Oh, you don't know nothing. You got or whatever." His character is awesome. But they basically, the ex-presidents hit a bank. They do their whole kind of thing. They never hit the vault. They just take money from the drawers, and basically they're in and out within 90 seconds, essentially. There's a couple other FBI agents that have this. They're kind of roasting Pathis because of his theory. They find the getaway car, which is they dumped it up on Mulholland Drive near the Hollywood side, but basically because if you in that scene, you can kind of tell where it's shot from, because I've been in that area a few times. But Keanu kind of gets in an argument with Gary Busey, where he gives him the theory that the ex-presidents are surfers. So Keanu Reeves tries to take up surfing. He meets Tyler, who's where he goes surfing, and then screws up, gets yanked out of the water by Lori Petty's character, who's like, "You're an idiot for coming out here. You don't know what you're doing. Stay out of the water," because he basically almost drowns at that point. And then they kind of run her ID, or run her through a database to see an angle that he could work to get in with her, so he could potentially learn to surf. So as he's learning to surf from her, they run into who is later revealed to be the ex-presidents. They kind of take a liking to Johnny Utah, and they kind of play beach football with him. They invite him to some parties. He ends up getting into a relationship with Tyler, and this is kind of they then figure out that they through a hair sample, they ran a hair sample of one of the ex-presidents to see like what chemicals were like near it, so they could kind of figure out what beach the ex-presidents go to. So there's like they're walking on the beach, they're like grabbing hair samples and stuff like that. And then at one point, Keanu is just surfing, doing like a little stakeout. This is after he's met Bodhi, and this is kind of where he gets into the fight with Anthony Kiedis' character and War Child and all that. Bodhi breaks the fight up, and then invites him over to a party at his house later that night. And then he's kind of hanging out with them for a while. They go on another. They eventually try to do a stakeout on the initial gang of people that they had dealt with Kiedis and War Child. And it ends up being that they're not the ex-presidents, but then they end up screwing up some other investigation by the DEA, who had been working with those guys for a while, and they like two of them get shot. I think like Anthony Kiedis' character gets shot in the foot. So basically, Pathis and Utah have kind of screwed up this guy's like entire investigation. So and then John C. McGinley's character is like not too pleased with that as well. But then Keanu tracks or tails Bodhi around. You don't see, this is a scene where he's just doing exposition to Pathis. You don't actually see him doing this. But he's like, oh yeah, they went to a bank. They were in there for like 20 minutes. They then went to a storage unit. They took out all the stuff from Bodhi's house and packed it up. Because basically what the ex-presidents do is they just love surfing. So they basically rob banks to fund what Pathis describes as like an endless summer vacation. Which it's just kind of cool. Like it's like the ex-presidents for the case of the movie are the villains, but they're like at least initially like they're going in just robbing banks. They're not shooting anybody. They're not doing anything like that. Then they're using the money just to kind of serve. It's actually a kind of very interesting kind of like villain story, if you will. But eventually, like they are doing another stakeout on a bank where they know the ex-presidents are going to hit. And this is kind of where the movie takes a huge turn, because now Bodhi knows that Keanu Reeves is in the FBI, and basically there's like a huge chase through the, like a bank. Like Pathis and Utah try to chase him down. There's like a huge car chase, and then like there's a foot chase after that between Bodhi and Johnny Utah, where like they're running through like alleys and like houses. There's literally a scene where like they go through a house and it's hilarious. So like Bodhi like gets a dog, like grabs a dog, like a big pit bull, and just throws it at Johnny Utah. Johnny Utah catches it and throws it off and then kicks it. It's just weird because I think even in the Point Break Live thing, there's actually like the one that it's going to be in the description. There is a scene where somebody throws a huge stuffed dog at the guy playing Johnny Utah. Johnny Utah like had like a knee injury when he was playing like college football, which flares up, and he also has Bodhi kind of in his sights, but lets him go. He basically just starts shooting, like screaming and shooting into the air, kind of. And then even Pathis is like, you either were scared or you're getting in too close to these guys, or like you're basically becoming too friendly with them. So Pathis is kind of onto him because he definitely lets Bodhi go. Tyler discovers that Johnny Utah is in the FBI. She like throws his ID down and has a gun and like points the gun at him and like shoots like his pillow or whatever, and then she kind of leaves. I don't know why if Johnny Utah was kind of undercover, why he would just keep like his FBI stuff like easily findable in his house. I don't really know, but the ex-presidents now have a discussion about like they're like, hey, Johnny Utah's on to us. This is no longer a game. Like, dude, we got to get out of here. And that's when, at this point, kind of everybody knows that the ex-presidents knows that Johnny Utah's in the FBI. Johnny Utah knows that they're the ex-president. So like they're both kind of now, it gets very tense because when they're on the plane, initially in the first skydive scene, there's Bodhi points at the thing, like the ripcord on the parachute. He's like, hey, when you hit like 3,000 feet, pull that. And he's like, who packed my chute? And he's like, I packed it. And he's like, but you can take my pack if you want. So there's a whole thing where they're trading around like parachutes, because now Keanu, it's kind of indicated that like they're like, hey, like we give him a faulty chute, we could like totally like just get rid of this guy. That's kind of implied. But then Bodhi's like, no, if you don't want that chute, you can have mine, or you can have Gromit's, or you can have this guy's suit or chute or whatever. Then they skydive. It's a beautiful sequence. It's awesome. I never really had the desire to go skydiving, but like that scene kind of like it looks cool, but don't necessarily know if I would want to do that. But they land and Bodhi opens a van. There's like a VCR, like a small TV in there. He's like, hey man, this is an insurance policy. Just hit play, bro. And he does. And now Tyler's been kidnapped by another, not a member of the ex-president. It's like a non-serving member. He's not one of the robbers, but he's just basically somebody that like, he's like, hey, he's like, if I don't meet this guy at a certain place in a certain time, Tyler's gonna get killed. So you better like just like let us like go, so we can like. He's like we're gone kind of thing. They do one final robbery, and this is when kind of Bodhi like really becomes villainous because he's like they never hit the vault, and this one last robbery he instructs the other ex-president members to go to the vault. So now he's getting kind of sloppy because without going into the vault, they probably would have got away with it totally. Because there's like an undercover cop there. There's like a huge shootout ensues where one of the ex-presidents gets shot. Johnny Utah also gets shot. But he's wearing a vest. Patrick Swayze, Bodhi pulls off his Reagan mask and is like actually just like shoots like what I think like the security guard or something, and then they leave. So that was definitely like kind of like supposed to indicate that like Bodhi is like totally in villain mode now. He's been the villain the entire movie, but like up to this point, he's been pretty chill. They haven't like killed anybody, and they haven't gotten greedy with like how much money they're trying to take because they, like I said, they never hit the vault, but now they have. Keanu knows where we're going, so they basically track them down to an airport. There's a shootout at the airport where another ex-president gets killed. Pathis gets shot and gets killed as well, and then they at gunpoint get Johnny Utah onto the plane. There's a huge conversation of like I think Roach is another one. I think he got shot. Both Roach and Bodhi dive out of the plane. Roach eventually dies. They leave Keanu in the plane with no chute, so Keanu has to like basically like free fall, catches up to Bodhi, and then when they land, his knee gets hurt again, and Bodhi is able to escape. Tyler gets released, so he kept his word there, and that's kind of where it does a huge time jump to 9 months later, because earlier in the movie, Bodhi was talking about riding the perfect storm, like perfect wave. There's like a 50-year storm coming. It's going to hit Australia. And Keanu tracks Bodhi to that beach. And basically he's like, hey, like, I'm bringing you in. There's a fight. They fight kind of like in the surf, like around the shore. Bodhi gets handcuffed to Johnny Utah. And he's like, hey, man, like, he's like, I'm bringing you in. He's like, nah, he's like, let me just surf. He's like, I'll come back in. Let me just surf this wave. It's a once-in-a-lifetime wave. And then Johnny Utah uncuffs Bodhi. Bodhi swims out. The cops are like, what are you doing? You're letting him go. You're letting him go. You're like, or he's like, you're letting him live or whatever. And he's like, kid, I was like, I didn't let him go. And the guy's like, well, we'll get him when he comes back in. And then Keanu's kind of final line is like, he's not coming back. And then it's basically Bodhi does his final surf, basically gets killed in this huge wave. It's heavily implied, it's not shown, but it's basically nobody would survive that anyway. So as he's walking, Johnny Utah takes his badge and just tosses it into the water. It's a really great ending. It's kind of, and Patrick Swayze at that point had like shaved, so he looked more like he did in Ghost in that scene. But in the most of the movie, he looks like he does kind of in the poster over there with like the beard and like the like longer hair. But when he catches up to him during the time jump, which is supposed to be 9 months later, he's like more or less clean shaven and what have you. So, but overall, it's an awesome movie. I owned it on Amazon Prime. I bought it on there years and years ago, and it's always a good time. It definitely is a very like 90s movie. It's kind of like what like the kinds of movies that make this series worth doing. It's highly entertaining. The chemistry between Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze is great. Gary Busey's awesome in this movie as well. Like I said, John C. McGinley and John C. McGinley is great. I gotta bring up the actress's name. Or Lori Petty is also really good at this. So I highly recommend checking it out. So that is going to do it for this episode. We'll be back again in a few days, covering a video game from 1991, and then we'll be jumping into 1992 and all that. So again, that's going to do it for now. So remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.